Today, we're diving into a really powerful guide for turning those personal struggles we all face into real sources of strength. We're going to break down some key ideas from the Faith Builder Workbook by Lynette Thomas. It's a framework really designed to help you connect with God and, honestly, to fundamentally change your whole perspective. So, if you've ever felt just weighed down, let's get into it. You know that feeling, right? Where you just feel stuck or completely overwhelmed, or maybe there's just this emptiness that nothing in the world seems to fill. We've all been there. And the workbook acknowledges this right from the get-go, saying, hey, this is a universal human thing. And the core promise here is actually both simple and incredibly profound. It suggests that the real path to turning your challenges into victories and finding a genuine purpose is all about building your faith. And it's presented not as some passive belief, but as a truly active tool for transformation. So where does a journey like this even begin? Well, the workbook frames the starting point not as some chore you have to do, but as an invitation to hope. The whole thing is built on this foundational idea of salvation, and the key insight is this: it's not about earning your way or trying to be good enough. The source material really drives this home, quoting scripture that says, "For it is by grace you have been saved through faith. It is the gift of God, not by works." In other words, it's a gift offered freely, an open invitation for absolutely everyone. And when you accept this invitation, you get what the workbook calls the honors of kingdom citizenship. Now, this isn't just some abstract idea. We're talking about real, tangible benefits. Your past is completely wiped clean, you become part of a new family, you get a direct line to God Himself, and you're given a brand new purpose and identity. It's a total game changer. Okay, so how does this faith thing actually work in practice? The workbook doesn't just give us theory, it shows us faith in action through these powerful stories from Scripture. They're kind of presented like portraits or case studies that really illustrate what faith looks like in real, messy, challenging situations. So, our first case study is a Roman centurion. And this is such a fascinating choice because it immediately shows that this kind of profound faith isn't limited to a certain background or group of people. You can find it in the most unexpected places. This quote right here, this is the heart of the whole story. The centurion was a guy who understood command and authority, and he recognized that Jesus' authority was on a whole other level. It was absolute. He didn't need a big physical show. He believed the word alone was more than enough. It's just a perfect picture of deep, trusting faith. So the crucial point is what we can learn from him. His story teaches us that building faith really means trusting in an authority that's way greater than our own, believing in promises even when we can't see the finish line, and coming to God not with demands, but with genuine humility. All right, next up, we have one of the most dramatic transformation stories ever told: the story of Saul of Tarsus. Before his encounter with Jesus, Saul was a fierce persecutor of the early Christians. I mean, he was convinced he was defending his faith. The change in him was just radical. He went from being the church's greatest enemy to its greatest champion. His entire identity, his mission, his whole perspective, it was completely flipped upside down. And this wasn't some gradual shift. It was a total transformation sparked by a single, powerful encounter. The lessons from Saul's story are just so incredibly encouraging. It shows that absolutely no one is a lost cause. God's grace is bigger than any mistake we could ever make. It shows that God doesn't just forgive, He reassigns, giving people a brand new mission. And it really highlights that a personal experience with God is what forges a faith that can truly withstand anything. Okay, those stories are powerful, for sure, but how do we apply those lessons to our own lives, right now? This is where the workbook pivots from history to practice, introducing a central concept it calls the think again mindset. So what does it even mean to think again? Well, it's a conscious decision. It's about hitting pause and actively choosing to question your own negative thought patterns and assumptions. Then you replace them with a perspective that's based on the truth of God's promises, not your own fears or what you think your limits are. And listen, this isn't just some modern self-help idea. The workbook grounds this concept right in Scripture. This verse from Philippians is like a practical filter for your thoughts. It asks, are your thoughts true? Are they pure? Are they worthy of praise? If not, well, that's your cue to think again and refocus your mind on what is good. So this is where the learning gets personal. The workbook really encourages us to move from just absorbing information to actively reflecting on our own mindset. So let's start with this first question.
Just take a second and answer it honestly for yourself. When you face a problem, where does your mind naturally go? Does it go to what God has promised or to all the reasons why you think you can't succeed?
And let's go a little deeper with this one. Your perspective on challenges changes literally everything. Do you see them as roadblocks that just stop you in your tracks? Or do you see them as setups for God to show His strength and for you to grow in your faith? The Think Again mindset is all about choosing that second view. Deciding to change your thinking is a huge first step. But how do you build that deep gut-level trust you need to do it consistently? For this, the workbook gives us a really practical framework. The workbook presents trust not as an on-off switch, but more like a progression, like you're leveling up. At first, your trust might be based on consistency, just seeing things happen over and over. Then it grows based on experience. You start to predict behavior because you've seen it in action. But the goal is this final level, identification-based trust. This is where you don't just trust God's track record. Your heart is so connected and aligned with His goals that your trust just becomes second nature. So how do we level up? Well, the workbook gives us these actionable steps. This is the real, practical work. It's about daily habits, filling your mind with God's promises, actively looking for things to be thankful for, reminding yourself of how He's come through before, and stepping out in obedience even when it's tough and you don't feel like it. And this really brings us to the main takeaway of the entire workbook. Faith isn't a passive feeling, it's an active choice. Real, lasting change happens when we finally stop leaning on our own limited perspective and start taking those intentional steps of faith, trusting that God's plan is always better. So, we're going to end with this question, a direct challenge to you. Don't let this just be interesting information that you heard. Think about one limiting belief, one worry, or one negative assumption that you're holding on to. What is one thought that you will choose to think again about right now, today?